Okay. So, guys, I had a couple things planned that I wanted to record this week. I've got another interview coming early on in the week, and then I'm going to have a whole episode where, I'm talking about the NBA playoffs and a lot of the NFL draft, not just the Patriots. But I decided that instead of doing just those two things, I had to record something, and I'm just going to give you all my thoughts about what the Patriots did during the draft right now, and I'm going to not do that in my podcast full episode this week because, quite frankly, it would just take up too much time, and it would really just be a drag on the rest of the video because I'm not sure that I have ever been so angry about a team's draft in my entire life. Now, I've seen some Celtics drafts where I've sat there and gone, why did we even bother showing up? I would have rather you taken nobody than took who you did. But, and there's obviously been some Patriots drafts in the last 10 years where I've sat there and gone, what the heck are you doing? I don't understand what's going on. And I guess it's because I got spoiled, right? So, everybody thinks it's amazing being a Patriots fan, and it is. We've been very, very blessed as a franchise and as a fan base over the last 20 years because it's just been 20 years of excellence, and it really has. And so to even complain about anything seems a bit strange, but that's actually kind of poor choice of words there. But the one thing that has really been a drag, actually there's two things that have really been a drag over the last decade, is watching all these great players in free agency, in the draft, the Patriots having a chance to draft all these great players, and they just don't. And that has been really the biggest drag. And then, of course, also all these, great players in free agency that will really help the Patriots. And for the most part, with a few exceptions, there's been nothing. All these guys that have been available for trades, nothing. It's just every year there's opportunity after opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and the Patriots just don't seem to want to take them. And last year, when Bill Belichick, or I should say 2 years ago, when Bill Belichick saw what the team looked like without Tom Brady and how average talent was not going to get it done, not in the AFC, and just not in the NFL in general. When he saw that, I sat there and I really genuinely thought to myself, oh my God, I think that this might be, he might see that he needs to do things differently. And he did. I mean, and it wasn't just him either. It was Robert Kraft, of course. It was the entire, front office of the Patriots. They looked at our roster and said, this is just not good enough. And they went out and paid a lot of money in free agency. They got Jalen Mills, Matt Judon, Devon Godshaw, obviously Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry. You got a lot of playmakers on offense and on defense, and spent more money than I've ever seen them spend in one offseason. And quite frankly, I feel like they spent more money in one offseason than they had in 10. And it was amazing. I then saw them take the quarterback that they needed to take in the first round. They took exactly who they needed to take. They either needed to trade up for him, or they needed to just sit back and hope that Mac Jones fell, and he did, and they took him. Then when somebody that they really wanted was slipping into the second round, they actually traded up and got Christian Darrisaw. They actually did it. And then they drafted a guy who was falling in the draft in the third round in Ronnie Perkins, who I still believe can really do well at the NFL level, and he just had a lot of injuries last year and never got on the field, but I think this year he'll be very important. They actually drafted a guy who was projected to go really high and ended up falling to them, and they actually did the smart thing. Then they drafted a beast of a running back in Ramondre Stevenson. I'm sitting there like, oh my God, they've hit on their first 4 picks. I mean, not only are these 4 picks really good picks, they're phenomenal picks. These are possible future Pro Bowl picks, and for Patriots, that does not happen. I can think of maybe 2 in the last, 15 years before last year. So obviously, Mac Jones doesn't count because he did make the Pro Bowl last year. But I mean, I can think of Logan Mankins in 2005 was drafted high up in the draft and was a Pro Bowler many times over. Nate Solder was drafted high up. He was a Pro Bowler, I think, once or twice. Now, obviously, he's not all that great. And then, Devin McCourty has been drafted and been a Pro Bowler. Dante Hightower, Chandler Jones, those were in one draft. But the thing is that, this is over a period of 20-plus years. And that's really it. I mean, unless I'm completely forgetting somebody, there's been nothing. There has been no amazing Pro Bowl talent coming into the Patriots that the Patriots have drafted. I mean, you've got a couple of, you lucked out with Rob Gronkowski. He's unbelievable. So you really hit on that one. So good on you. You got him in the second round. But, it's just been, overall, it's just been consistently bad, the drafting. But last year was different. Last year, it felt like they were hitting on everything. It felt like they were just hitting the nail on the head every single pick. You couple that with spending all that money in free agency. And I sat there and went, oh my God, times are changing. Times are changing in New England. They're doing something different. They knew they had to, and they are. They're going to change their strategy from now on. And then this offseason happened. And the Patriots did exactly what they always do. Nothing of note. Nothing of note. And you know what? I get it. You've been doing it for 20 years and it's worked. So why change? Why would you do anything different? You did it last year. You set the foundation. Why continue to do it? I'll tell you why. It's because instead of going for it, and instead of trying to add premier talent this year, you have basically told the entire NFL you do not think you have a chance to win a Super Bowl this year. That's what Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft, and the rest of that front office has done. They have looked at the lay of the land and said, it doesn't matter what we do. We're not better than the Bengals. We're not better than the Bills. We're not better than the Chiefs. We're not better than the Dolphins. We're not better than any of the top tier teams in the AFC. So there's no point. We're not going to be able to compete with them, even with what we have. And even if we try to get better at certain places, it's not going to matter. That's what the Patriots have said. That's what the Patriots are telling you. Now, why am I saying all this? It's because the draft just got over with. And again, as I said early on in the video, I have never been so angry at a draft than I have been in my entire life. Now, I'm going to get into how crazy the draft was just overall in my podcast later this week. So keep an eye out for that. It's going to come out Friday at 5 p.m. as all of my podcasts do. But what I will say right now is that this draft could not possibly have I'm sure it could have possibly gone worse. But for what the Patriots got in value, it really might as well have not shown up. And I know that's really, really harsh. I'm well aware. And I do think that some of the players that I will get into might turn out to be good players. But where the Patriots decided to draft guys and the actions that they took to get there versus the people that were available at the same time that they took these players, I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm going to have to figure out what to say, right? Otherwise, you guys are not going to have anything to listen to. But I genuinely just, sometimes I don't know what to say. It was just appallingly bad. It was so bad. And, day 3, day 2 was a little bit better than day 1. Obviously, day 1, there was just one pick. And day 2, quite frankly, wasn't all that great either. You hit it, you did okay. And day 3, I think frustrated me almost as much as day 1 did. Yeah, day 3 and day 2 were a little better than day 1, but day 3 frustrated me almost as much. And I'm going to get into it. So, Patriots, they had the 21st pick in the draft this year. And This, again, as I said earlier, this draft was just bonkers from the opening tip. I mean, I haven't looked at my mock draft at this point when I'm recording this. I haven't gone back and looked at it and compared it to how the draft actually went in terms of the first 2 rounds. But I genuinely think that I got the first 2 picks correct and then got every single pick from then until the end of the second round completely wrong. Like, I'm not kidding. I really feel like I got everything wrong after pick 2. If I got another pick, great. If I picked another guy going to another team, or even at the same spot to a different team that I picked, then I don't know who it is. I can't think of it off the top of my head. So it was just bonkers. I mean, and I said that it would be, and I think a lot of people said that it would be. But this bonkers, I mean, this draft was unreal how ridiculous it was. Now, all that being said, because it was so crazy, there were people that were available at number 21 for the Patriots that I just could not believe were available at 21. Namely, mainly, cornerback out of Washington, Trent McDuffie, who, if you had told me that Trent McDuffie was going to be available at 21, I would have said, well, then they better draft him, because he is way, way better than that draft spot. That's unbelievable value at number 21 to get Trent McDuffie. I think in my mock draft, I had him going 12th, 13th, maybe 15th. And I could have seen him going top 10 had the board, shaken out a little differently. If Sauce and Derek Stingley and, maybe one other corner were already off the board, which actually is what ended up happening. I could have seen that. So, Trent McDuffie being available at 21, amazing. Amazing. And Nakobe Dean was available at 21 too. I would have been all right with that, but he fell all the way to the 3rd round, which blew my mind. I didn't realize he was injured. But, nonetheless, Trent McDuffie was available at 21. Did the Patriots draft him? No. What they did was they traded back to pick 29, which is actually what I predicted them doing in the first round with trades mock draft that I did, although I think I might have had them trading back to 28 with the Packers instead of 29. But quite frankly, who cares at that point? The idea was the same, right? Of, taking a team that had 2 draft picks and trading one of them in the back end to move up to 21. And then moving back into, last 4 or 5 picks of the first round. Like, the idea is still the same. I don't think, I'm not going to be upset at, you picked the wrong of the 2 teams. Whatever. The concept was right. So, you traded back to 29. You didn't draft Trent McDuffie. Okay, that's fine. But you know what? Maybe that was their plan all along. They wanted Dax Hill, who was available at 29. He's a Patriot player. That's who I had them drafting at 28 in that mock draft because he could play safety, he could play slot corner, he could do everything on the field. So that's where they're going. That's what I'm thinking when they traded back. And I tweeted this out, so I have to get up at 4 a.m. to work. And so I ended up actually falling asleep 2 or 3 picks before the Patriots ended up picking. I tried my best to stay awake. I just couldn't do it. And when I woke up that morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, my first or second thought was, oh man, I didn't see who the Patriots drafted. Did they get Dax Hill? Did they take somebody else? Did they reach on a wide receiver? What did they do? And when I woke up and I saw that Cole Strange, the guard out of Chattanooga, was who the Patriots picked at 29, I thought I was having a nightmare. And again, I tweeted that out. I legitimately started scratching my arms and scratching my neck and, clapping my hands, quietly, because it was 4 a.m., but quietly just kind of tapping my hands together because I genuinely thought that I was not awake. I genuinely thought that somehow I had woken up to a dystopian world where the Patriots had drafted a 3rd-round guard in the 1st round. Not even a 3rd-round skill position player that they took a huge leap on. Not even a 3rd-round wide receiver, a 3rd-round running back, a 3rd-round defensive back, a 3rd-round edge rusher. Like, nothing. They drafted a 3rd-round guard One of the cheapest positions in the NFL. One of the easiest positions to draft. The Patriots, in this draft alone, took 2 other guards in this draft later on. It's one of the easiest positions to draft or to sign in the NFL. And you took a 3rd round rated guard in the 1st. That's not even bad enough. That's not the worst part of it. Bill Belichick had a press conference afterwards where obviously everybody was wondering why in the world he had made one of the worst projected 1st round picks in the last decade. And I saw Alex Leatherwood get drafted in the 1st round. Like, I saw a whole bunch of reaches. I've seen crazy, crazy stuff. But this one made no sense to really anyone. I've seen a couple of people come out and try and defend it because Cole Strange is a good player. I will give you that. Listen, if I did a 3-round mock draft, I would have loved for the Patriots to draft Cole Strange in the 3rd round. I like Cole Strange as a player. I thought that he was very undervalued. I thought that he was probably more of a late 2nd round pick than a mid to late 3rd round pick as he was being projected. But he certainly was not a 1st round guy. He just wasn't a 1st round guy. I don't care how you slice it. He just isn't. And Bill Belichick went out there, and I don't know who the reporter was. Somebody asked him, and God bless them for doing it, because it really shows the draft delusion that is Bill Belichick. And I'll get into that in a minute. The guy or girl, whoever it was, asked, obviously you traded back to 29 and took Cole Strange. So, did you have a plan in place at 21 that ended up getting picked? So then you traded back because you couldn't get the guy you really wanted? And that was your backup plan? Or if you had stayed at 21, would you still have picked Cole Strange? And Bill Belichick looked this reporter in the eye and said, obviously we were happy that we traded back. And you never know, maybe we would have gone somewhere else, but my guess is that if we stayed at 21, we would have drafted him. Delusional. It's delusional. You're telling me that you would have taken a 3rd round rated by everyone else in the NFL guard at 21. And then you have the audacity to say he would not have lasted much longer in the draft. So we felt like we had to draft him then. The ESPN had an index that there was over a 90% chance that Cole Strange would have been available when the Patriots picked in the 2nd round. Now, with how wild and crazy this draft was, could Cole Strange have gone really early? Yes. Yes, he could have. As evidenced by the fact that he did go in the 1st round. But if the Patriots didn't draft him, could another team have come up and gotten him? Yeah, maybe. I could see it. But to spend your 1st round pick on a guy that was universally rated as a 3rd round pick, maybe a 2nd round, late 2nd round pick. Some people even had him in the 4th round, which I don't agree with that. But some people even had him in the 4th round. Sean McVay was on a podcast or did some interview, and he said that he was hoping that Cole Strange would be available for them at their 1st pick. At 104. That is 75 picks before or after the Patriots would have picked Cole Strange. 75. 1 round is 32 picks. Unless, of course, it's a compensatory round, like the 3rd round, the 6th round, the 7th round, whatever. Like, the first 2 rounds are 32 picks. So that means that you picked a guy that somebody was hoping would be there in 2.5 rounds from the time you picked him. What a reach. Are you kidding me? Yes, we needed a guard. Absolutely. We needed more depth and strength on the offensive line. But you know why we needed more depth and strength on the offensive line? It's because the New England Patriots decided to trade their Pro Bowl right guard Shaq Mason for a equivalent of one singular bottle cap that came from a half-used bottle of Gatorade. You know why? Because the Patriots traded for a 5th-round pick. And the Patriots, over the last 7 years, have basically said to us, we hate 5th-round picks. We trade them away. We use them to trade up. We use them to trade back. We don't like 5th-round picks. They had, 10 picks? Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They had 10 picks in this draft. 0 5th-round draft picks. 0 5th-round draft picks. Because they just hate 5th-rounders. So you know that they're not going to get any use out of that 5th-rounder. So what's the point? You put yourself in this position, Patriots, to need a guard. So what you did was you traded a Pro Bowl guard for a draft pick you weren't going to use, and then spent a 1st-round draft pick on a guy who's not going to be as good. Is anybody getting how this makes no sense? A 5th-rounder that you're not going to use is what you thought Shaq Mason, a Pro Bowl guard, was worth. And you spent a 1st-round pick to get a guy who will not be as good as Shaq Mason, or at least probably won't be as good, because there are very few guards in the NFL who are as good as Shaq Mason. There's maybe 5 or 7, maybe. You're talking about a top 10 guard, a guy that scores unbelievably well in all the analytics that football has. He's one of the best guards in football by any measure you look at it. And you traded him away. Was he going to be a free agent next year? No, you had 2 more years. 2 more years of him. On a very controllable contract. And you traded him and then spent a 1st-round pick on a guy who is very unlikely to be that good. Is Cole Strange going to be good? Yes. Probably he will be. Now, is he going to be as good as Shaq Mason? Maybe, but it's not guaranteed. And we'll talk about more stuff like that in my podcast, where, teams trading a sure thing for somebody who's not going to be a sure thing. If you guys know what I'm alluding to, then great. But in this instance, it's also true. And you didn't even use the capital that they gave you for it. You used other capital that you already had that you didn't need to use had you not traded that guy away. You're telling me that if you had Shaq Mason, you would have drafted Trent McDuffie at 21? You would have drafted Dax Hill at 29? Whatever the case is, you're going to tell me that that's what would have happened? I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Unbelievable. And by the way, this is just the first pick. There's still 9 more picks, and I'm not going to go this in depth on all 9 of the next 9 picks because obviously we'd be here for 4 hours. And honestly, I could rant about this for 4 hours, but I'm not going to do that to you guys. I'm not going to do that to anybody. I love you guys too much. But my goodness. And then, I think that their 2nd-round pick was even worse. And you know what? Maybe the only reason that it wasn't worse, and it was only just as bad, is because at the very least it was a skill position. And at the very least, you could see why the Patriots decided to take this specific player because of what his skill set is. You could at least see the logic in that realm, whereas Cole Strange, the only logic is that you traded away a guard so you needed to fill a hole on a depth chart sheet. So you just reached to high heaven to get a guard. I would say maybe it's just as bad. Maybe it's not worse, but it's just as bad. Taekwon Thornton. Now, I had never heard of Taekwon Thornton. I never watched Taekwon Thornton play in college. I didn't really watch any Baylor games. Sorry. They haven't been good since RG3. So, I don't watch a lot of Baylor games. I do apologize for that, but, maybe I should. But Taekwon Thornton, I just had not heard of him. And then he ran, a 4.21 unofficial time at the combine, and it ended up being a 4.28, which was the fastest out of every wide receiver. And I mean, that's impressive. Guy's fast. That's awesome. I'm glad that he's fast. He can't really do much else. He's not a great route runner. He's not a great jump ball receiver. Rookie wide receivers already struggle in the Patriots system. First year wide receivers, whether it's first year actually in the NFL or just first year on the Patriots, typically struggle in their system. There's been a few exceptions. Kendrick Bourne was an exception this year. He played very, very well considering how other first year receivers that have come into New England have played. But Taekwon Thornton, I don't know how complex the Baylor offense is. I don't know how he's going to be able to handle the New England Patriots playbook. And even if he was able to handle the New England Patriots playbook, are the Patriots going to be able to use him properly? Are they going to use him like Nelson Aguilar? Like they did last year with Nelson Aguilar, where he's basically a decoy 95% of the time to open up the middle of the field for other receivers? And they would never throw him the ball? Is that what they're going to do to Taekwon Thornton? Maybe. I don't know. But here's the kicker. I had a 4th round grade on Taekwon Thornton. Now, again, I didn't know much about him. I was mostly for him in particular. I was going off of what other people had said about him, other experts that did know more than I did about him and that had watched him. I was going off of what they had for their opinions. And when a guy that's that fast goes that late, it's because they're not great at much else. Think about John Ross. He has been a terrible, terrible football player in the NFL. I think he went top 10 in the draft, maybe just outside top 10 in the draft, even though he had showed virtually no other skill other than being really fast. Imagine being that fast and going that late. That probably means you're not polished in many other areas. Now, there's been exceptions. The only exception I could think of one, Tyreek Hill, that was a speedster that got drafted late that ended up developing. And that's what people are comparing Taekwon Thornton to. There's never going to be another Tyreek Hill. I just don't think that you're going to have another 5th round wide receiver that's going to be the fastest man that's ever played in the NFL. I just don't think that's going to happen. Could it happen? Maybe. I don't know. But for me, I had Taekwon Thornton graded late 4th round, maybe even early 5th round. And when the Patriots traded up in the 2nd round, I thought they were going to go get Nakobe Dean. We needed linebacker help. By the way, we still need linebacker help. We had 10 picks and didn't pick a single linebacker. Fine. Whatever. I thought they were trading up for Nakobe Dean. I thought that, maybe you were trading up for another defensive back. I can't remember off the top of my head who was available at that time other than Nakobe Dean. I know obviously he was. You could have gone in a multitude of ways. Could have gone just in a ton of different ways. And you traded up, which means you gave up draft capital to pick a guy in the 2nd round who was rated, and I'm going to get the number right, just by ESPN. Now, I know that all these might not be correct. Rated the 117th best prospect in the draft, which, again, that is mid to late 4th round. Maybe early to mid 4th round. And he was listed as the 18th best wide receiver in the draft. And yet, he was the 10th wide receiver off the board. When you also had George Pickens still available, Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati still available, and Sky Moore out of Western Michigan still available, all of which I had 2nd round grades on in my draft. Whether early or late, I had 2nd round grades on. And I genuinely think that if George Pickens had not gotten injured, he would have probably been another 1st round pick. and he was still available, and he does all the same things that Taekwon Thornton can do, but better, and won a national championship this year, and he was picked, I think, legitimately the next pick by the Steelers. I'm sorry. I think he went 2 picks later. He went 2 picks later to the Steelers. I mean, I don't know how people can defend this kind of thing, because this is what's been happening in New England for the last decade plus. Horrible decision-making at drafting. Now, I want to make something clear. I think Cole Strange is a good player. I said earlier in this video, I would have loved for the Patriots to draft Cole Strange in the 3rd round. I would have even been okay if they had drafted him in the 2nd round. You know, I would have been like, okay, I understand. Maybe you think he won't be available by the time you pick in the 3rd round. I get it. Make sure you get your guy. I would have understood. I would have certainly 100% understood if you drafted him in the 2nd round, but not the 1st round. Not when you were in position to draft Trent McDuffie. No, just... Okay. Moving on to Taekwon Thornton again. I think Cole Strange will be a great player. Maybe Taekwon Thornton can develop. I don't know. I have to see it. I'd have to see it. But I do have to say this. Even if they do develop, if you go on the logic that, you know, you could have probably gotten Cole Strange for your 2nd round pick, and you could have probably gotten Taekwon Thornton with your 3rd round pick. Probably. Maybe not, with this draft being all crazy, but probably. What if you'd have stayed at 21 and drafted Trent McDuffie? What if Trent McDuffie goes to the, God knows, I don't even know where he got drafted. Oh, the Chiefs, right. Maybe he goes to the Chiefs, and maybe he's an absolute lockdown corner. Maybe he's just a monster out there. Doesn't let anybody get any separation. Maybe he turns into your next, you know, Darrelle Revis or something like that. Maybe he turns into an Asante Samuel type player. That's just the number 1 DB and everybody knows it. You're going to have to live with the fact that you could have had him. You're going to have to live with the fact that you could have drafted Trent McDuffie. And you probably still could have gotten the guy that you drafted instead of him in the 2nd round. And you probably still could have gotten the guy that you drafted in the 2nd round instead in the 3rd round. You could have had all 3 of those guys. Even if Cole Strange and even if Taekwon Thornton end up developing into something great, you could have had them. And Patriots had 2 3rd-round picks in this draft. So you still 155% could have kept Marcus Jones, who I actually like. I like that pick. It's one of the few picks that I like the Patriots had all day. Unbelievable. I get so emotionally invested in this, and maybe that's a weakness of mine. Maybe I do so much research and I do so much, you know, I try to get so much knowledge with this that maybe it hinders me. Maybe I just need to trust the process. Maybe I just need to understand that what Bill Belichick is doing is that he knows what he's doing. He's been doing this for 25, 30, 40, whatever, how many years, 50, 100, 239, however many years he's been doing it. I don't care. Maybe I don't know anything. And you know what? Maybe I don't. I probably don't know anything. But here's what I do know. That if Isaiah Wynn does not re-sign with the Patriots, that will make 17 consecutive 1st or 2nd rounders that the Patriots have drafted that did not get a 2nd contract in New England. 17 straight. If you're counting and you have 1 2nd round and 1 1st round pick every year, then that means that you have 9 straight years of your top 2 picks not being good enough in your eyes to stay. You're going to tell me that Bill Belichick has that kind of great vision? He's lucky that his coaching and his coaching staff are so good at developing guys in later rounds and undrafted guys that they make up for the fact that they don't have 1st rounders. I don't think people talk about that nearly enough. Bill Belichick is the best in the NFL at developing undrafted players. I don't think that's even a question. Especially in the secondary. I've seen so many undrafted guys in the secondary end up being unbelievable. 2 of which being J.C. Jackson and Malcolm Butler. Your last two guys, other than Stephon Gilmore, that have been your number one corners on your team. Two of the last three have been undrafted. And I think, unless I'm mistaken, Jonathan Jones, who's also a phenomenal player, was undrafted. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure he was also undrafted. If he wasn't undrafted, he was drafted very late, whatever it was. I mean, Bill Belichick can develop undrafted players, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing who the Patriots end up signing in the undrafted free agent pool. Because Josh Jobe out of Alabama is somebody I thought was perfect for New England. Long, lanky corner that's good in press coverage and can cover kicks, can do kick returns, can go on special teams. And, of course, he went to Alabama, which means, Bill Belichick's best friend coached him for the last few years. So I'm guessing that he knows a lot about him. He didn't get drafted. I had a early 5th round grade on him, maybe even a late 4th grade on him. I like him a lot. I think he can really develop. He didn't even get drafted. So, maybe there's something wrong with him that I don't know about, but he didn't get drafted. If you draft him, I mean, you got another really, really solid option and DB, but, I'm getting off track here. You're really good at developing undrafted free agents if you're Bill Belichick. And that's great. That's awesome. But that doesn't make up for the fact that 17 straight first and second round picks have not turned out to be what you thought they were and not stuck around in New England. Now, does that mean every single one was bad and didn't stick around in New England? No. Because there have been some guys that are good and then just ended up leaving or because they were overpriced or whatever the case may be. Nate Solder is one of those guys. He certainly earned a second contract, but he didn't, Patriots didn't want to pay him $70 million like the Giants did, and you see why they didn't want to sign him for that long and for that much money, because he's not very good anymore. So it's not as if every single one of those 17 players was bad, but most of them were. Like all but a couple were pretty bad. And Bill Belichick is also one of the best coaches at reclamation projects, bringing other teams' failed first-rounders and bringing them in. But that all does not hide to me. Not anymore. Maybe it did. Imagine how good the Patriots would be if they actually would hit on their first-rounders and actually would hit on their second-rounders. They'd be unstoppable, but they can't. They don't. So they have to bring in undrafted free agents and develop them. They have to bring in these failed first-round, second-round reclamation projects from other teams and put them in a good system. Because they meaning the Patriots, cannot draft well in the first couple of rounds. I talked about Cole Strange being a third-round ranked guard. Logan Mankins, I talked about him earlier as well. He was a Pro Bowler and a great center and guard for many years for the Patriots. He was also drafted in the first round, and he was also rated very, very low in the draft, like 3rd or 4th round, just like Cole Strange. And he ended up being great. Could that happen to Cole Strange? Yes. Will that still make the pick worth it? Maybe. I don't know. I would say no, because you could have still had him in the second round. I'm gonna stick with that, unless Cole Strange ends up becoming the best guard in football, and we ended up getting him, and it's not going to matter where we got him. Then I don't really know what to tell you. I don't think that was a good draft pick. I don't think that it was worth it to get Cole Strange. Again, I like Cole Strange. I really like him a lot. I'm glad that he's a Patriot. I'm just not happy at all that he was the number 29 pick in the draft, when we could have had somebody else and still probably gotten him. And you know what? If you were afraid that you weren't going to get him, you traded up in the second round anyway. Trade up and get him instead of Taekwon Thornton, who you could have gotten with your next pick. It blows my mind how ridiculous that this draft was. Moving on, I talked about Marcus Jones. I like him a lot. Undersized corner. People kind of alluded to this during the draft process. If he was 5'10", 5'11", he probably would have been a first-round pick. He has a lot of skills. He's a great kick returner, great special teamer. He's maybe can even be wide receiver in the NFL as well. He's got great hands. We'll see what the Patriots actually have up their sleeve for him. I really like that pick. But you had 2 third-round picks at one point, and you traded one away to move up in the second round. Maybe you could have gotten him a little bit later. Whatever the case is, I do think that was a good pick. And I'm going to give the Patriots credit where credit is due. I think that was really, really a good pick. Because you lost Gunnar Olszewski, so you don't have a punt returner or kick returner this year. And so I understand wanting him just for the returner. And he's also a DB, which you need DBs. You just need bodies back there at a certain point. So I get it. And he's fast, and you got to be able to compete with some of these smaller, quicker wide receivers in your division and in the AFC. Jack Jones out of Arizona State, another defensive back. I don't really know much about him. I do know that he's another corner that's, a little bit undersized, doesn't play all that great in press man coverage. I feel like you probably could have gone a different direction at that point. I think Khalil Shakir was still available at that point, but I am going to check just to make sure I have that correct. Let me see. Yes, Khalil Shakir was available. Calvin Austin was also still available. You actually had 3 fourth-round picks before Calvin Austin went off the board. There are other guys that I think you could have really gone with that, made a little bit more sense. Again, I don't know much about Jack Jones. Maybe he'll end up developing. He's another double J in the secondary. We had J.C. Jackson and Jonathan Jones, and now we have Jack Jones and Jonathan Jones. I thought we were going to trade up for Jermaine Johnson just for the memes of having another double J. Josh Jobe would have been another one if he signs, undrafted free agent to New England. I think that makes, another double J in the defense. It'll just be so many J's. And then, the main commentator for the Patriots this year will be J. Jonah Jameson from Spider-Man comics and Spider-Man movies. So, it'll all just be lots of J's going on. And so, all jokes aside, I don't know much about Jack Jones. We'll see how he develops. We'll see. I wasn't the biggest fan of that selection, but again, maybe he'll develop a little bit better than I'm giving them credit for. And then we drafted Bailey Zapp out of Western Kentucky with the actually we drafted him 2 picks later, but I wanted to talk about him first before I get into the running backs because I'm gonna lump them together. So Bailey Zapp, when I first saw the pick. Again, just knowing, the wide receivers that were still available, I was sitting there thinking, I'm sorry, does Mac Jones not play for the Patriots anymore? Like, what in the world are we doing? We have 3 quarterbacks already, Jared Stidham and Brian Hoyer. At least I think Jared Stidham's still around. He might not be, but, we have other quarterbacks, and obviously Mac Jones is your guy. Why are you drafting a quarterback? And by the way, if you're drafting a quarterback, why are you not drafting Sam Howell or Carson Strong? I'm going to mention this in the other draft, but Carson Strong didn't even get drafted. I mean, that's wild to me. I had him as a first-round pick at the beginning of the college season. That's crazy. He didn't even get drafted. But anyways, whatever with that, moving back to Bailey Zapp out of Western Kentucky, he lit up Western Kentucky. He really did. He set a lot of records. He's a lot like Mac Jones. Doesn't have, the best speed. Doesn't have the best arm, but he's accurate. He's really good at throwing in rhythm. Good at throwing guys open. So, competition at backup quarterback, I guess. So, I said earlier, I was like, I don't understand why he made the pick. But the more I thought about it, the more I, read up about him and the more that I kind of understood, the reasoning behind it. I was like, all right, 4th-round draft pick. Brian Hoyer is getting up there in age. Jared Stidham just hasn't turned out to be anything. So if anything, you're going to replace Jared Stidham on your roster with somebody who's younger and more controllable and probably better. So, all right, fair enough, I guess. Marginal difference. That's not going to really do anything unless Mac Jones gets really hurt and then Brian Hoyer gets really hurt. But fine. Whatever. I'm okay with that. Now I'll move on to the running backs. Something that I said earlier is that, a lot of these are good players, and I just don't like where they got drafted. And Pierre Strong is another one of those guys that, he seems like he's a good player. Very, very fast. Fastest running back at the combine. I think the Patriots, when we said that we needed speed and athleticism, I don't think we meant, reaching that far for Taekwon Thornton and then drafting another running back when you already have 38 running backs on your roster. you know, I don't know, man. It's so strange to me. Again, there's that strange again, but Pierre Strong is very, very fast. He can catch balls out of the backfield. He's a good player, and, I'm happy that we're going out and getting more speed. That's something that, I'm happy with. Happy that at the very least, if you're going to draft guys that I'm sitting there going, why? At least make them be very athletic and fast because we just need speed. Like, there's not a lot of speed on the Patriots right now, and Taekwon Thornton and Pierre Strong definitely give you guys speed. 100%, right? But then there's Kevin Harris, and I quite frankly just don't know why he got drafted. Out of all of the people that I saw get drafted, I don't know why Kevin Harris got drafted. And this is no disrespect to Kevin Harris, okay? He might turn out well, but here's what I say. So there are a few injuries that, there's a few things that players have in terms of injuries that I don't think should get drafted or shouldn't get drafted very high. And one of them is very severe back injuries before they ever turn pro. Now, there are exceptions to the rule, but there are very few. The only one that I can think of is Rob Gronkowski, who had back surgery in college, but ended up being fine. But he had back problems his whole career. He still has back problems. So, you're talking about a guy, you don't know how effective he could have been had he not had that back problem. But obviously Gronk is Gronk, and, he's a one of one. He's a unicorn. But, Kevin Harris, he had back surgery in, I believe, 2020. Let me check my facts here just to make sure. Yeah, 2020. He had back surgery. Didn't play well last year at all. Had one good game, and it was in the bowl game that they had, really. I mean, it was, a good game, but it was the only one that he had. And, he doesn't really catch the ball out of the backfield, doesn't really have top-end speed. I don't really know about his run or his pass blocking ability or anything like that. He's wildly unremarkable to me. And you already drafted a running back. And you already have Damian Harris. You already have Ramondre Stevenson. You already have J.J. Taylor. You still have James White. Why are you drafting a running back at that point when you have other guys that are on the board at other positions that you need? You still need linebacker at this point. You haven't drafted a single one. No linebackers. And spoiler, they didn't draft any linebackers in this draft. And that, I think, was their, second need in the entire draft. I think it legitimately went... Okay, it was their third need. It went corner, and then it went guard, and then it went linebacker. They didn't draft a single linebacker, not inside linebacker, not outside linebacker, nothing. They drafted nobody of worth at the linebacker spot. They didn't draft anybody. And so you double up on running back, and I just don't get why. Are you planning on not keeping Damian Harris or Ramondre Stevenson for the next 2 or 3 years? Because that's not going to go over well, considering you don't really have much else on offense. Yeah, you got your tight ends. Hunter Henry scored a lot of touchdowns last year, but I think he only caught 500 yards worth of receiving yards. Jonnu Smith didn't do much else for you. Kendrick Bourne had a good year, and Jacoby Myers had a good year, but Jacoby Myers ain't sticking around. They're not going to want to pay him that money. Devonte Parker, who knows what you're going to get out of him? And Kendrick Bourne had a great first year, but what's his year going to be like when he's not the number 2 guy? I don't know. Kendrick Bourne, crazy to think, he might not even be in the rotation this year. Him or Nelson Aguilar, one of them might not even be in the main rotation this year. And you still have N'Keal Harry. Which, that's another one. Why do you still have N'Keal Harry? He stinks. Cut him, for God's sakes. Trade him for the last pick in the draft and draft some random dude. I don't care. Trade him for a 2029 6th round draft pick. I don't care what you do. Get rid of him. He's not doing anything for you. He stinks. Why is he still here? Anyway, you double up on running back, and I don't understand why. And when you double up on running back, you got a guy who's wildly unremarkable and has had back problems throughout college. At running back, which is already a position that's easy enough to get injured. Don't get that one at all. Not a great player and not a great pick. Sam Roberts out of Northwest Missouri State, I thought that was a great pick. I really did. That's, another one that I looked at and I thought, that's a great pick. He absolutely dominates at that level. Now, obviously, Northwest Missouri State, that's pretty specific. Like, that's, clearly not your top-of-the-line Division I college. It just isn't. But look at these stats. Last year, 18 tackles for loss. Just tackles for loss in, what's a college season? 12 games, 11 games? That's more than one per game. That's really, really good. And 47 tackles for loss in 3 seasons. Incredible. That's really, really good stat. For a Patriot team that still needs help stopping the run, I think Sam Roberts was a steal for them, and I think he could be a monster. That's a great pick. No problem with that pick at all. Don't want to get into that anymore. And your last 2 picks in the draft were both guards. Now, I want to talk about the last one first, Andrew Stueber out of Michigan. Now, he's a big boy. He's 6'7", 325. He really has tackle build, but I think in the NFL he probably projects more as a guard, and ESPN and NFL Network agree that he definitely is probably going to end up being a guard because he's a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker, and generally speaking, your tackles are more, supposed to be able to protect the passer on the outside against your big pass rushers that are coming off the edge, and your run blockers are usually your guards because they're going to be the ones that are swinging out, they're going to be the ones that are getting upfield, they're going to be the ones that are going up against these nose tackles and defensive ends that are big and wanting to kill you. So, I think Stueber projects to be more of a guard. And I thought that was a great pick, except for the fact that you already drafted a guard in the first round, and you already drafted Chasen Heinz out of LSU, who, quite frankly, I don't think is as good of a player as Andrew Stueber. I just don't think he is. I mean, listen to what ESPN has to say about Chasen Heinz. He stops moving his feet on contact and frequently battles to stalemate or falls off blocks late. His hands aren't married to his feet, and defenders have some success getting into his frame, and he lunges in pass protection. Now, is that damning on his career? Of course not. There's been plenty of guys that have had a lot of negative reviews. But Stueber, I just think, is much more of a polished player at this point, and I think that he really could help step in and fill in right away, especially as a swing tackle or a swing guard, which the Patriots like to use quite often in the run game. But it feels weird to draft him when you already drafted 2 guards. I like Andrew Stueber. I'm happy that he's a Patriot, but again, you already drafted 2 guards. You already drafted 2 guys at that position. You needed linebackers. You needed defensive backs. You maybe even needed more wide receivers. I would have even taken another safety maybe, considering you're probably going to lose Devin McCourty after this year. He's probably going to retire. And, you don't know what you're going to get out of Adrian Phillips. He's done well so far, but, you never know. And Kyle Duggar, he's a very specific type of safety. So, if you don't have a lot of free range guys are going to be able to, help when guys take off over the top for wide receivers, you're going to really have a defense that's going to get hurt. So, again, this is a really bad draft. I can't really say much else other than that. It was such a bad draft. It was one of the worst drafts I've seen. Now, there were some good things about it, right? Some of these guys I think are going to be good players. But when the New York Jets had such an amazing draft, when the Kansas City Chiefs had such an amazing draft, when the Bengals had such a great draft, when the Ravens had such a great draft, all these teams in the AFC that are moving around and are really just doing such a great job of getting guys that are talented on their team, unless you're the Ravens and you're trading away your best wide receiver. But, all these teams are saying, okay, if we're going to compete, we've got to get some weapons. We've got to get some guys out here that are going to be great. And, the Patriots tried to do that in their own way, but they overpaid so much. And they overpaid last year in free agency, too, for Nelson Aguilar and a couple other guys. They overpaid. And it's sad to see. And I'll say this about the Patriots, okay? So, this year, I mean, we've seen 10 Pro Bowl talented wide receivers get traded or go to different teams at this point. 10, maybe even more. And the Patriots came away with Devonte Parker. Now, you guys have seen that video probably. I love Devonte Parker. I think that it was a great trade and great value for that trade. But the fact that Hollywood Brown, A.J. Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Allen Robinson, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, I'm forgetting some people, obviously, but all these guys that are just so absurdly talented and guys that can just be your number one guy, bar none, and really transform your offense. All these guys that were available, all these guys that got traded, all these guys that signed these big contracts that could really help your team, and you didn't come away with any of them. You didn't come away with any of them. Devonte Parker, again, I love. He's not better than any of the guys I just mentioned. And he never will be better than any of the guys that I just mentioned. And you had a chance to get any individual one of them. All right, Mr. Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper, too. He got traded for, what, a 6th round pick, for crying out loud? Really? Like, all these guys that got traded or left in free agency or whatever, you didn't get any of them. You didn't get any of them. That was your chance, man. That was your chance. You need number one wide receivers in today's NFL. You just do. You just do. Look at the teams that have won the Super Bowl since 2019 when you last won it. Look at the teams that have won it. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers had 2 or 3 number one caliber wide receivers on that team. The Kansas City Chiefs had arguably the best tight end in football. Had arguably the best wide receiver in football in Tyreek Hill. Had the best quarterback in football in Patrick Mahomes. And then, of course, this past year, the Rams. Right? Literally the best wide receiver in Cooper Kupp. Triple Crown winner. And then you had OBJ. They would have had Robert Woods, but obviously he was injured. You just need weapons. Look at the Bengals. They had no offensive line. Their offensive line might as well have been replaced with a revolving door. And it would have been just as effective against the defenses in the NFL. And they made it to the Super Bowl. Why? Because they had weapons at every position. At running back. At all 3 of your top 3 wide receiver positions. And tight end. They just had weapons that could get open in 2 or 3 seconds when a 300-pound defender is right in the face of your 23-year-old quarterback. Everybody just got open. And you could win contested catches. You could win over the top. You could go up and box people out with T. Higgins. You got a great slot guy in Tyler Boyd, and then obviously Jamar Chase and all of his greatness. Look at all the other teams in the AFC playoffs last year. The Bills, the Chiefs, obviously the Bengals, the Titans even. All these teams had number one wide receivers. Even the Steelers, man. Look at their wide receiver core. Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool. At the time, Juju Smith-Schuster. All 3 of those guys are better than anybody you have on your roster right now if you're New England. All 3 of them. All the guys that I mentioned early on in the trade process. A.J. Brown, Amari Cooper, Devontae Adams, all these guys. All of them are better than anybody you have on your team. And the Patriots have refused to go out and get any of them. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. When you get to the playoffs, you are going to be run off the field by whoever you play every year. Just like you were this year. I really thought that Bill Belichick would have sat there. And watched his defense not force the Bills to punt. Not just in the playoff game, but in the game that they played in week 16. They didn't, or week 15, whatever it was, they didn't punt in 2 games. Because their defense was old and tired and slow. And I really thought that after all of that, watching them give up 45 points to the Bills, literally not having them punt, not forcing a turnover, nothing. The Bills just went up and down the field all day long as if they were playing a scrimmage. As if we were playing backyard football. I really thought that when Bill Belichick saw that, he would have said, you know what, we got to get faster. We got to get younger on defense. But instead, he decided to re-sign his 36-year-old safety. Devin McCourty, I love him, but he's 36. He does not have the same burst. He does not have the same cover ability as he once did. And I don't think that's really an argument. He let Dante Hightower go. Who did he replace him with? Nobody. He didn't replace Dante Hightower. He let Jawan Bentley go. Who did he replace him with? Jawan Bentley. He re-signed him. He's just not fast enough. He's not good enough. He didn't get any speed on defense. You want to say Marcus Jones? Okay, fine. But that's really saying a lot because he wasn't that great of a cover guy in college. And when he can't play on the outside, and you've already got a slot corner in Jonathan Jones who's pretty darn good. So, where is he going to play? Where is he going to play? He's not going to play. He's your special team guy and your kick returner until Jonathan Jones leaves. And even if Jonathan Jones leaves, I don't think he will leave. Maybe he will. But even if Jonathan Jones leaves, it's not guaranteed that Marcus Jones is going to be able to develop in that area. You're really, really asking a lot out of a guy that, quite frankly, just might not have that in him. Might not be able to cover these slot guys in the NFL. Who knows? Maybe he can, but he might not be able to. I really thought that when Bill Belichick saw all that, he would say, I got to get faster on defense. He didn't. He somehow looked at what happened last year, and he's going to go out there with a defense that could not stop the Bills with J.C. Jackson and let J.C. Jackson walk out the door. And he's going to go out there and try and stop him without adding any extra help. That's what the Patriots have done this year. The Patriots could not stop the Buffalo Bills, who do not have the best offense in football. They just don't. They're a good offense, but they don't have the best offense. They don't have a running game. They are a one-dimensional offense that has a generational quarterback in Josh Allen and one, maybe two good wide receivers in Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. And then, you got a couple other guys sprinkled in there. One guy that, Isaiah Mckenzie, I almost forgot his name, who was just killing the Patriots. They don't have that crazy good of an offense. It's good, but it's not unbelievably good. And you couldn't stop him with, arguably, a top 5 corner in the NFL on your team. And now that top 5 corner is gone. You let him walk in free agency, and you're going to go out there and you're going to try and stop that exact same offense who also drafted Khalil Shakir this year. You're going to go out and try and stop that offense. You're going to go out there and you're going to try and stop the Bengals with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. Not C.J. Uzomah anymore, but I think who did they sign? Hayden Hurst? That tight end is a pretty good tight end too. Austin Hooper maybe? I don't remember who they got. They replaced him with somebody that was almost as good or just as good. Whatever it was, I can't remember. But you're going to go out and try and stop them with that defense? Really? Is that how it's going to work? Did you improve your pass rush? Are you going to make up with it with a great pass rush? Because I don't think you improved your pass rush. You didn't sign anybody for that. Are you going to outscore them? Did you add all these great great playmakers on offense? Yeah, you got Devonte Parker. Is he going to take you over the top? And he's going to be that difference maker? That 1,500-yard receiver? He's gotten over 1,000 yards once in his career. He's not going to be that huge difference maker for you. He just isn't. That's not the kind of player he is. You're really, really counting on Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar, and now your second-round wide receiver, Taekwon Thornton. You're really counting on those guys. I mean, that's scary, man. That is scary. And you could have had any of the guys that I mentioned. Any of the guys that I mentioned, you could have traded for him very easily. And quite frankly, since you got just Cole Strange with that first-round pick, I would have been thrilled now looking at it had we traded away that 29th pick or that 21st pick to get Devontae Adams. Or to get, Tyreek Hill. Or to get A.J. Brown. Or to get Hollywood Brown. Any of these guys, I would have been thrilled Thrilled to get rid of that first round pick, considering all we got was Cole Strange. All we got was a third round projected guard. Are you kidding me? Seriously, are you kidding me? I can't get over it. It's ridiculous. Okay. I'm covered in sweat and I am just, I'm furious. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep an eye out for the interviews and the podcast this week. I'll see you next time.